So here in this story, we're watching society crumbling down in this dystopian future of Australia, and we follow the character of Max, a police officer that has to deal with a violent motorcycle gang that have started to control the land around them. Hi, welcome back to my channel and my review for Mad Max from 1979. So this one was directed by George Miller and stars Mel Gibson as Mad Max himself. So this is going to be a review series. I'm going to go through and review all the movies individually leading up to the release of Furiosa, which I believe we're getting in May now. And I have to say, I'm quite excited for Furiosa. I think the trailers look really good. I like the direction it's going in, and you know, it's given me a great reason to go back and revisit all of these older films. And I've always been quite a fan of the Mad Max films. I enjoyed them a lot growing up, and it's just been such a long time since I've seen them now. It's been at least 10 years, so I was really intrigued to come back and see them again. So thought this would be a great time to do it. And it was interesting. I was looking at a few reviews online before doing this filming, and I noticed about this first one that a lot of people are quite mixed about the movie now. And you know, to some extent, from a filmmaking perspective, I can understand the problems people have. It does have a lot of issues in its pacing and some of the editing and the way it's done. And you know, it was obviously very constrained by its budget at the time. But I have to say, I still have a blast with the movie. I still think it's a lot of fun. I think the action scenes still hold up in a lot of places. It's quite a thrill ride to go on. It's, you know, it's a short film, so it absolutely flies by. And I just love the whole atmosphere of it as well. So I can't fully understand the people that really dislike this one now. I still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. I would still highly recommend you go back and give this first Mad Max a go because it is a lot of fun. So yeah, in this story here, we're following Max, and he's one of this group of police officers who are trying to maintain some kind of control in this Australian wasteland, which has now started to be overtaken and run by these motorcycle gangs. And something interesting watching this again, I actually remembered it that this first movie was set before the apocalypse, and they just happened to be dealing with this really rough motorbike gang. And then obviously the second and third one take place in this apocalyptic world, and that's actually not at all the case here. Like, this first one is taking place in a time where you've already started to have this breakdown, you know, due to, you know, loss of resources. They're running low on stuff like fuel, which has become a high price commodity there. And there's obviously been some kind of civil issues to the point where now the authorities no longer have much control over what goes on. So the people are getting a little bit crazy. They're not afraid of the police or anything around them. They steal from places, they attack people, take everything they have. And it's just a world that's living in more chaos. And we're following this guy, this lead character, Max, and he's someone who is quite a principled person. He's tried to keep his values. You know, he's a family man, and he's still trying to keep some kind of control and order within this community as everything starts to get really chaotic. It's a little bit strange how it's structured as well, where the synopsis for the film effectively describes it as this revenge thriller where you have this particular event that happens to Max later on in the film, and this is what leads him on this path of revenge against this group of bikers. But this event doesn't actually take place until like well over an hour into the film, which I thought was a bit unusual. So if you're kind of expecting it to be a revenge film, you might be a little bit let down by it. Like, structurally, it's all a little bit odd. When the first hour is a little bit meandering in where it's going, it's more just like a series of events just kind of playing out. So it's a little bit unusual to watch, I think. But in terms of what it does do well, especially in this first hour setting everything up, is really give you this feel of a land that has no authority, no control, that, you know, people are driving around absolutely recklessly. There's so much violence taking place, and just this overall feeling of like everything being out of control is really present here. And this is where a lot of the film shines, because the action sequences that take place here, like a lot of the car chases and everything like that, where they're trying to crash people off the roads and take people out and everything like that, it's all pretty insane. And I find it very refreshing to watch. You know, when we get a lot of very, sort of generic CGI heavy action films these days that really sort of just take me out of the intensity of it, I find something like this really enjoyable to watch. Because, genuinely, some of the stunts here, you fear for everybody involved in the production of this film. A lot of the scenes you're thinking, that looks really real to me. How did they get people jumping out the way of a car coming down a highway at 120 or whatever? It's pretty scary. It does get my hands sweating a little bit watching some of these scenes. So there is a grounded and very real feeling where it feels like there's real stakes, real risk at play here, and that's something that really helps me get immersed in an action film again. Whereas when you get too much CGI and it's all effects work, I just start to feel like I couldn't care less. And that's something for me that really stands out to me about Mad Max and still makes it to be a really enjoyable action film. I think it's quite a lot of fun as well seeing Mel Gibson in this breakout role he had. And, it's interesting, Mel Gibson, even when he was younger, he still came across very mature and old. I think he's only 22 when he filmed this. He doesn't feel like somebody of that age, He does have a kind of level of maturity and presence about him where he feels old beyond his years, I guess. But he's a really nice presence in the film. I enjoy following he plays a very likeable character that you're very happy to go along with and follow. And, there are a lot of really eccentric characters in this story. And I think if it wasn't for Max himself, it would probably start to feel just a little bit over the top and wacky at times. I think him being here helps ground the movie in a few places where you can enjoy all of these crazy villains, and some of the guys that he hangs around with, they're all very over the top, very animated and stuff like that. But having him as the main character, I think, really helps with the overall effect of that. So they kind of complement each other quite nicely. So always great to see him in these early roles. And I think for the time, and being his first major role, I think he did do a really good job with it. So getting into some of my issues with the movie, I do think it is very poorly edited. And what I mean by that is a lot of the ways the scenes are kind of transitioned together, it doesn't really have a natural flow to it. A lot of it feels very disjointed. There's some unusual structural issues, I think, with this story where you have scenes that don't really make sense with what's going on. The order in which these events are told often doesn't really make sense. And it's just a bit all over the place at times. I do think it's one of those things where the movie overall doesn't really work in a lot of ways. I think you're better off just kind of enjoying each of the individual scenes and appreciating them for what they are, because like a lot of the, as I've said, a lot of the action set pieces, some of the character moments, some of the interactions are all a lot of fun, and they work in themselves. But as a movie, the way this is all put together, it does feel a little bit off at times. Like there's a particular scene in the middle where you have the character of Jim Goose, which is Max's best friend in the film. It also works with him in the police. And out of nowhere, he's suddenly just racing down the highway on this motorbike at an insane speed. The film hasn't really established where he's going or why, but he's just racing down this highway and he flies off his bike, has this massive injury. Then they go to get him a car. He's bought one of these kind of pickup cars. He gets his broken bike. He gets in that. He's driving back up the highway, and then he gets involved into this other incident, another crash that involves this bike gang, and you're just like, what the hell is going on here? Like, why have you had these two completely separate incidents just put together like that? So it's weird stuff that's in the film like that just doesn't fit. And I'm sure, if it had a bigger budget and was edited today, you could actually probably turn this into a much better film that has a more natural flow and just works more as an overall movie. I would say everybody other than Mel Gibson as well, a lot of the acting isn't particularly strong. And, at times I do wonder whether it almost feels like it's kind of intended to be that way, just given how over the top everything is and how crazy a lot of these characters are. You can't really tell whether it's just intentionally bad or whether it's just that these characters, that it's an amateur production. These are not very experienced actors having a go at playing these crazy villains and stuff, and maybe some of it just doesn't really work. But I'm not sure. I think the acting though does definitely stand out as not being particularly convincing in a lot of parts. You know, Mel Gibson's great. I think the guy that plays Toe Cutter as well, the main villain, I think he's pretty good, pretty quirky, and he feels right within the role. But a lot of these other characters are played by actors where you can tell this was a low budget production. But you know, overall, I just really love the overall atmosphere of this film. I've said this before on my channel, I really like apocalyptic stories, you know, a situation where a group of characters are thrust into a scenario where, you know, there's no more authority. They're trying to keep hold of their humanity. It's all about survival and working out how to exist within a world that's turning to shit. I just always find myself getting really invested in those kind of stories, and that's no different here. And, you know, it does genuinely take you to another place and make you really feel like this is taking place in this apocalyptic future. And I really like that about it. And there's something about just the whole setting as well in Australia, you know, where you've got these great big open highways and it's always really cloudy there. Just something about the whole feel and vibe of the movie, I've got to say, just really works for me. So for anybody that's enjoyed the latest film rather with Fury Road and is looking forward to Furiosa, I would highly recommend you to go back and give this first film a go and give it a chance. You know, it is different. It is a different experience watching, of course, a much lower budget version of what you're used to seeing in action today. But it's a movie that I've still got to recommend because, as I say, I still have a lot of enjoyment with this film. So I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5 rating. So that's all of my thoughts for you on Mad Max. As I've said, I am going to be going through the entire series leading up to Furiosa. So if you'd be interested in hearing all of my thoughts on all of these movies leading up to that, please do consider subscribing and coming back to join me for that. Also, please do join me down in the comments section and let me know all of your thoughts on this original Mad Max, and let me know if you're excited for Furiosa. Thanks so much for watching this review, and I'll see you next time.